the initiative Women in ETFs. It's a great pleasure to have you all here. Thank you. Today we will see a bell-ringing ceremonies at various stock exchange all over the world to celebrate International Women's Day. And we are delighted to be a part of it here in Frankfurt. Liebe Gäste, der Tag soll Ihnen vor allem zwei Gelegenheiten bieten: Education und Networking. Das sind Ziele der Initiative Women in ETFs und zugleich der Deutschen Börse. Als Deutsche Börse setzen wir uns stark dafür ein, die ökonomische Bildung in Deutschland zu stärken. Wir wollen in diesem Zuge anregen, sich stärker und noch differenzierter mit den Chancen und Risiken der Geldanlage an der Börse auseinanderzusetzen, insbesondere wenn es um Altersvorsorge geht. Deshalb bieten wir am heutigen Tag erstmals gemeinsam mit beiden Institutionen am Finanzplatz ein Vortragsprogramm speziell für Frauen. Die Vorträge richten sich an alle Frauen, die Interesse an Themen wie Geldpolitik, Börse, Altersvorsorge haben, unabhängig davon, ob potenzielle Anlegerin oder bereits erfahrene. In den Fachvorträgen von Frauen für Frauen wollen wir vermitteln, dass die Börse eben kein Buch mit 7 Siegeln ist und dass gegebenenfalls bestehende Missverständnisse im Zusammenhang mit Anlage über den Kapitalmarkt leicht ausgeräumt werden können. Wir finden es als äußerst begrüßenswert in diesem Zusammenhang, dass Mitarbeiterinnen der Deutschen Börse zusammen mit anderen Partnern das deutschlandweite Netzwerk Die Anlegerin gegründet haben. Ein Netzwerk, das sich zur Aufgabe gemacht hat, weibliche Anlegerkultur zu stärken. Meine Damen und Herren, Education und Networking, das gehört für uns zur Börse dazu. Denn die Börse ist auch ein Ort, an dem Menschen zusammenkommen. Das zeigt ihr zahlreiches Erscheinen heute. Neben ihnen sorgen die Spezialisten hier auf dem Parkett, die über 35.000 Besucher jährlich, die Börsengänge, Dutzende Veranstaltungen pro Jahr und die Medien, die in mehr als 100 Schalten täglich die Bilder aus diesem Handelssaal in die Welt senden für reichlich Dynamik und Sichtbarkeit. Dynamik und Sichtbarkeit, das ist auch das, was wir heute für den Weltfrauentag nutzen wollen. Übrigens, das Gebäude wird hier in Zukunft noch eine größere Rolle als Ort der Begegnung und des Austauschs sein. Vielleicht haben Sie es bereits gelesen oder Sie haben es beim Betreten des Gebäudes gemerkt, wir bauen um. Wir schaffen hier deutlich größere und ein interaktiveres Besucherzentrum, um der breiten Öffentlichkeit noch einen besseren Zugang zur Börse und damit auch einen besseren Zugang zur ökonomischen Bildung zu schaffen. Ebenso entsteht durch den Umbau ein neuer Veranstaltungsbereich direkt hier hinter den bekannten DAX-Tafeln und ein großflächiges Konferenzzentrum, was wir dann auch der breiten Öffentlichkeit zur Vermietung zur Verfügung stellen werden. Der Standort der Deutschen Börse hier am Finanzplatz und auch am Börsenplatz Frankfurt wird in Zukunft damit noch stärker als Anlaufstelle für Emittenten, für Investoren, für Medien und die breite Öffentlichkeit. Es soll auch so sein, denn die Börse verbindet seit jeher Menschen, Märkte und Möglichkeiten. Ich freue mich nun, das Wort an Alice Hübener von Women in ETFs und Teil zu übergeben. Vielen Dank, dass Sie heute hier sind und uns allen wünsche ich gemeinsam interessante Begegnungen und spannende Gespräche. Vielen Dank.
Ja, herzlich willkommen. Vielen Dank an Sie, Frau Bandov, und natürlich ganz, ganz herzlichen Dank an das ganze Team der Deutschen Börse, die diese Tradition möglich gemacht haben. Ich sage Tradition, denn dieses Ring the Bell for Gender Equality findet nun zum 5. Mal in Folge statt und heute bzw. zu Beginn nächster Woche an über 20 Börsen weltweit. Also ich glaube, das kann man durchaus feiern. Das Event wird von Women in ETF natürlich mit Unterstützung von starken Partnern koordiniert. Die möchte ich natürlich einmal nennen. Das ist Sustainable Stock Exchanges Initiatives, United Nations Global Compact, UN Women, von der wir auch die Frau Kitzel heute im Vorstand zur Begrüßung mit da haben, sowie auch IFC und World Federation of Exchanges. So ein Event global auszurichten geht natürlich nur gemeinsam. Jetzt der kleine Wechsel rüber ins Englische, der Höflichkeit halber hier und so international wie wir sind. So I've been working in ETF sales or in this industry for about 3 years now, and have to say I'm absolutely amazed, encouraged and impressed to see so many female professionals in one room. It does not happen very often, and it should happen more. This really emphasizes to me the importance of coming together. At Women in ETFs, I found a global network of over 4,500 members in my industry that come together with a very fitting motto for us today. That is, to connect, support, and inspire. So of course, feel free today after the bell ringing to take those steps and start with connecting today, and of course in future as well through such events and networks. Before we move on to the most exciting part of the day, I would like to just add one more thing. I would like to ask all of you, or invite all of you, to just take a moment today sometime and ask yourselves, how can I contribute to making a more gender equal environment? It's each and every one of us. It can be small things in your workplace, among your friends, your colleagues, and of course also, and maybe most importantly, towards creating more gender equal minds in the younger generation. So, with no further delay, I'm happy
for inviting me to this exciting and very day on International Women's Day. And of course, thank you for hosting us. I must just add to what Alice said, that it is going to be very inspiring. So Women in ETFs, it's a very impressive organisation, as Alice has outlined, and its value today is enormous. And that's not just because it brings together opportunity for women to exchange ideas, because the platform is global. And that enables it to really expand its agenda, get acknowledgement and get recognition. And that's really down a tribute to the people that are today involved in that organisation. So thank you very much to Alice and to all of those that are involved in progressing that organisation today. And I personally am really delighted to return to this venue today. It was almost a year to the day that I was here on the flotation of DWS to the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. Can't quite believe it's a year ago, so it's certainly a venue that holds very many fond memories for me. But today, what I want to talk about is a very important topic of gender diversity, how it's impacting the asset management industry, and also how we can influence that change and that pace of change. Let me first recap on the business case of gender diversity. So studies have long shown that gender diversity very much pays, and companies with higher levels of diversity will generate higher returns than those companies that do not. And the inverse happens at the bottom end of the scale. Just last week, I was reading in the Financial Times that funds managed by mixed gender teams have generated 6% higher returns than those funds that are managed solely by men or solely by women. Very much a clear business case for diversity in asset management if everyone was really needed. But for me, really, diversity is a bit more simpler than that. It's if you're bringing together people of different diverse backgrounds, it will generate thought diversity and better decision making. At DWS, we fully accept the business case of gender diversity, of course, and the executive board is quite proud that we have just around 40% of our population that is female, and many of those at the senior levels. To name a few females in senior positions, we have our Chief Investment Officer of Responsible Investments, we have our Co-Head of Passive Investing, and we have our APAC Head of Real Estate. However, we are aware
that the numbers at the senior levels aren't quite good enough just yet, and there is much more that we can do. And so we have set diversity targets for this year and beyond for all levels of the corporate grade structure. I would like to add that we've been actively addressing gender diversity at the more junior end of the career ladder, and I was really proud that last year our graduate intake was 58% female, tipping onto the other side of 50%, so a really great start. But along with the rest of the industry, there's much more that we can do and much more that the industry must do to create more change and more diversity over time. And there really are some compelling reasons to do this sooner rather than later. There's two fundamental changes that I look at that are influencing the asset management industry today. The first one is the importance of gender investors and investment decisions. As has been established, companies with senior women perform better than those without. And in this respect, corporate governance standards can be considered as being good if they influence and have higher levels of gender diversity. Gender lens investing is an example of ETF investing in our industry on a financial return that promotes gender diversity in companies. It's now becoming a little bit more mainstream than when it was first launched in 2009, and is certainly a growing segment in sustainable investments. In just the last 2 years, there's been numerous examples of investments that have been made in such gender lens topics and products. And one that I would point to is State Street's aptly named She ETF, which invests in US capital markets, large cap listed companies with high levels of gender equality at its senior executive levels and in its boards. We really need to see more of those kind of products, and I would encourage all of you to invest in those as well. So this all goes to show that gender diversity is vitally important to the asset management industry, not only because it's credible to ESG, but also because it's important to the long-term financial success of companies. The second change that's relevant for the asset management industry is the gender wealth gap. Now, March 8th, today, International Women's Day, does tend to produce a surge of information about gender inequality in the world. But I recently read in The Economist one gap that is closing, and that's the wealth gap. Women's wealth as a share of private wealth is rising, and it's reported that by 2020, women are expected to hold 32% of the total wealth wallet. Women's wealth is rising for two key reasons, amongst others, and one is that women are starting to take a bigger share of the higher paid jobs or jobs in general, and also that women are inheriting more wealth from their husbands and their parents than perhaps has happened in prior generations. So this rising trend of women's wealth will also have a big implication on the asset management industry in terms of what it invests in and how it invests. A Morgan Stanley survey has said that 84% of women are more interested in investing in sustainable investments, and this compares to an equivalent figure for men of 67%, although both are growing. So clearly a segment that we need to see growth in over time. In terms of how women invest, another study has showed that female investors have outperformed those of males in the market by 1 percentage point. And one of the reasons argued by this given study was that men were much more likely to be overconfident than women were in their investment choices. So I think the asset management industry is certainly at an inflection point when it comes to gender parity. The business case has got a strong rationale, but let's talk a little bit about what we can do to influence this change in the markets and our industry. And this is where I come back to our responsibility, how we can collectively support each other in the workplace and how we can be alert to the challenges. One of these challenges I have to point to is that women do have a greater tendency, at least, to lack the assertive confidence or to have a tendency to undersell their capabilities and have a need to feel that they need 100% of the requirements to fill a stretched role. I must say this is something that's very familiar to myself. This mindset really does need to change,
and we all need to be alert and aware of this constantly, including myself. And I must say this resonated to me quite recently when I was on a ski trip. I had to put myself into ski school, select the appropriate class, and I selected one that was probably slightly below my true ski ability. I very quickly came to regret that decision as my husband was whizzing down the slopes in the next class up, and I had to negotiate a promotion from that point upwards. Lesson learnt yet again. So, this confidence gap has been the source of much research, and Korn Ferry conducted a study into the success traits of a few women, or the few women, who have been CEOs of Fortune 1000 listed companies. And one interesting outcome from this study was when female CEOs were asked when they had realised they could be a CEO, the vast majority said it was because someone else had said that they could achieve it. Only 12% said that they had thought they could get to that position themselves. This is what's commonly referred to as the ambition gap. These women were driven to do a good job, to do the very best that they could in their field, but very few consciously aspired to be at the uppermost levels of leadership. So you all need to think about how this resonates for you individually, but for me it certainly resonated. I certainly didn't set out to be a CFO in my career, but here I am today, and I think the big lesson for me that I've learned is that really no challenges are insurmountable. You need to tackle them head on. The worst part of it is actually the fear of thinking of what's ahead. When you get on with it, you learn that you can absolutely do anything. That risk-averse nature is something to be conscious of, and I think I finally got over my own confidence gap, aside from my recent experience. So I'm very conscious of time and the fact that we are on the hour. So let me leave you with 3 thoughts today of how you and us can collectively have an impact on gender equality in our industry. The first is around sponsorship, which is really important to us and to everyone. So find a female that you can sponsor. Ensure that you have a sponsor for yourselves. Sponsorship is a really invaluable means you can get exposure to stretch opportunities. Secondly, be alert to underselling your abilities. Don't get stuck in the wrong ski class, which was my experience. It's impossible to be 100% good at everything, and 80% is really good enough. And finally, don't be passive. Speak up, be confident, never go to a meeting and don't contribute. Do come up with good ideas.